I've been struggling to find the best Switch controller to take with me on the go, and I have tried a few that I've liked quite a bit, but none that I really loved for portable play, let's say. That's when PB Tales reached out to me and showed me a picture of their controller that I actually have right here with me, and I've been waiting to finally get my hands on this. Very special controller, to say the least. And with that said, introducing the PB Tales Sagaya controller. This is my new favorite Switch controller, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Before we continue, don't forget that I have a Twitch channel that you can go ahead and follow me on for live microphone reviews and much more than that. But you're also going to find my Instagram and a link to the Tech Summit Discord in the description. So come join the community because it is a pretty cool one. We've also opened up a Patreon as of late where if you join, you'll be automatically entered to win one tech gadget every month in our exclusive giveaways. Details to that are going to be down below. Don't forget to check out the description for everything. Now let's get right into the video. Now this video is sponsored by PB Tales, the makers of this fantastic controller right here. I'm going to be testing this controller in 4 different genres moving forward, and these are going to be the 4 genres I believe a lot of people on the Switch use a dedicated controller for. So let's go ahead and begin with an unboxing before anything else. So it comes in a really colorful box, and shiny as well for that matter, but once opened it is going to reveal the carrying case, and inside of that you're also going to find the controller itself, the USB-C cable for charging and wired play, as well as instructions. It is a simple unboxing, but that's pretty good, I would say. Now let's go ahead and talk about the controller. This controller has a very unique design to it, as it is incredibly boxy. It's a plastic build, so it isn't sharp on any of the corners, even though it might seem so, and on the back, there's somewhat of a bump, which does make holding this controller easier than it otherwise would be. There's very little branding on this controller, focusing primarily on the aesthetic, and not to mention that this color scheme suits me very well. There are going to be other colors available as well that they feature, but this one was definitely my favorite of the bunch. You're going to find every button on this controller that you would expect to find, such as a D-pad, dual symmetrical thumbsticks, ABXY buttons, your triggers and bumpers, the USB-C port on the top, and things of the like. Additionally, you're going to find a turbo button on the face of this controller for adjusting the vibration motors on this controller, but it can also be used to program certain functions onto it, such as applying ABXY or LR, L2, R2 functions onto it simultaneously. And it's almost like a macro, but I don't think that you can assign any kind of stick or D-pad inputs onto it, though it is still a pretty neat thing to have around. Now, the buttons on this controller are pretty good too, including the triggers and the bumpers. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to when it comes to playing games with a controller that has this layout on it, but it is a pretty straightforward learning curve, I would say. The triggers and the bumpers are very clicky, and I really like how they feel, as it feels like an immediate press when using each one. Every other button on the face of this controller is pretty soft, but the ABXY buttons feel faster to press than the D-pad buttons per se, which is going to be a lot softer. And now the thumbsticks feel almost identical to the Joy-Con sticks, which I'm used to and I think are totally fine. By the way, there's no drifting to speak of here, so there's nothing to worry about in that regard. So let's discuss the gaming performance in those 4 little genres that I mentioned just a little bit earlier. In a turn-based RPG such as Bravely Default 2, I think this controller is more than appropriate for a genre like this. It's a small controller, so it's one that's pretty easy to handle for such a laid-back genre, since you can take your time by just choosing your actions, which makes this controller ideal for it. And the thumbsticks do allow for some pretty precise exploration and things of the like, and again, zero drifting to speak of here. So when exploring the overworld, the thumbsticks do a pretty fantastic job. However, in battle, I like to stick to using the D-pad instead for more precise input when digging around the menus for my commands, and even though this is a softer D-pad, it's totally fine for getting to the commands that you want without accidentally going any further in the menu or having to press the button twice or anything like that. I like this quite a lot for turn-based games like this, especially since it's such a tiny controller. And I know that a lot of you really do like 2D platformers, so I decided to test out Dead Cells on this, and as expected, it was a great experience. I do like to stick to the D-pad here for this genre of games too, and I found myself performing very well. The D-pad is very easy to press because of how soft the buttons are. I was actually very mobile mobile, and I felt like I could react in time to move away from any enemies and to remain consistent in my own movement. This was a pretty great experience. Again, I genuinely think that a lot of people will like this controller for platformer. However, I thought that this controller was even better for 3D platformers, such as Super Mario 64 from Super Mario All-Stars on the Switch. This is when I stuck to the thumbsticks, and I had a lot of fun with it. This game has never really been at the top of the list for difficult platformers, but it always will be one of the most fun ones in my opinion. I'm very comfortable using this controller for playing the game as intended, though the triggers did make this a little bit harder to get used to when trying to perform backflips and things like that, but I did eventually get used to it. Now, this is a price that I personally am willing to pay if it means that I can have this controller in the smallest form factor possible. So once more, this controller is pretty fantastic for 3D platformers, and it's probably my favorite for 3D platformers as a matter of fact. And when it comes to fighting games, I think that this was probably the toughest test for this controller because every single button gets used very frequently during any match. This definitely took the most getting used to from the rest of the genres, for instance, where I was losing matches fairly consistently when I first started to adopt this controller as my main controller. But when I did get used to using this controller, I ended up really loving it. This is because the triggers are very clicky, which I always appreciate since it makes me feel like using them is just much more responsive than it would be on other offerings, and the buttons being very close by to each other on the face of it, well, these buttons are going to be a lot easier to reach for them a lot more easily. And one thing that I neglected to mention a little bit earlier is that the vibration motors are pretty strong and they're pretty good at detecting impact on the game, hence triggering themselves at the right time, although the strength of the vibration always remains constant. I like it and I do enjoy them for just about every genre that I have tested here. And by the way, like, you can actually use this controller not only on the Switch, but it's also supported on Windows, Mac OS, and with Steam, which means that you should enjoy gaming on your PC with it if this controller does appeal to you. And when it comes to the battery life, I would say that it would last somewhere between 10 and 16 hours, although this is all going to be based off of your own usage. And like in my case, I do end up having to charge it fairly frequently since the battery life isn't exactly the best one out there. However, again, this is going to be based off of your own usage. So in conclusion, this is a really cool controller, one that's super portable, looks amazing, and is genuinely great for playing most games, especially indie titles and platformers on the Nintendo Switch. So what did you think about this controller? Are you interested in getting one yourself? Now go ahead and let us know your thoughts in the comments, and once more, very special thanks to the folks over at PB Tales for sponsoring this video. The Kickstarter campaign is still open as of now, so I'm going to be leaving that linked down in the description. And thanks so much for watching. I would actually go ahead and give a very special thanks to my tier 3 patrons, which are going to be Luke, Saad, Albazel, Omar, and Joe Moss. Seriously, thank you so much for all of your support because it really does go a very long way. Now on to the rest of the patrons, which are going to be the tier 3s coming right up. And this is super important. I would just like to give a very special thanks to all of our patrons, which are going to be listed right here on the screen. Again, a massive thanks to you all for supporting us to help us create the kind of content that we bring to you on a day-to-day basis. And thank you so much for supporting the Tech Summit podcast as well. And just remember that if you would like to be a part of this community too, and then do make sure to check out the links to our Patreon, where you don't only get bonus episodes of our podcast, but you also get automatically entered into one of our monthly giveaways of a tech product that we have reviewed that is of at least $50 in value or higher. So links to that down below. And don't forget to follow me on the rest of my social media, such as my Instagram and my Twitch, where I do stream fairly often. Now with that said, this has been Francisco from Tech Summit. Thank you for watching, and I will be seeing you all later. Enjoy.